Welcome to the Standards Assessment Process Review Committee meeting, the virtual meeting today. I'd like to welcome each of you to our meeting. And at this time, I would like to have Pam, will you put the agenda on the screen for us? I'm going to call roll now, and I want to say a little bit about that while that's coming up, which you should be able to see that now. You as members of the committee, as you have, I think this has been communicated to you through email. You do need to have your cameras open at all times. And when you are addressing the group or speaking, you need to state your name and whatever, if you're asking a question or whatever is being asked of you. So at this time, you should be able to see the agenda in front of you. I'm going to call the roll now for the members. And you should state your name and say present if you are in attendance. Dr. Deanna Ashby.
Present.
Professor Jacqueline Burnside. I think you're on mute, Ms. Burnside.
Present.
Present. Okay, thank you. Dr. Jack Jacobs.
Jack Jacobs, present.
Chris Lamons.
Chris Lamons, present.
Mary Lee Lewis. Mary Lee Lewis. I thought I saw her on the sign-in. Ms. Litters, are you on mute? It says she's left the conversation in chat. So maybe she will return. I'll keep it. Now she's back on. Mary Lee Lewis. Okay, I believe she has her microphone muted. Let's go on anyway. Aaron Milburn.
Aaron Milburn, present.
Philip Prokes.
Phil Prokes, present.
Jeannie Smith. Dr. Mike Stacy.
Mike Stacy, present.
All right. Hearing the present, we do have a quorum and can proceed with our meeting. I'd like to go over the agenda with you. Again, my name is Joy Barr, and I work in the Office of Assessment and Accountability. And you will be talking with several of folks in our office or in the Office of Teaching and Learning throughout this proceeding. The agenda that you have in front of you, you see on there that we've already done the call to order and the roll call. We will have an approval of the agenda at next and opening remarks, followed by introductions. Again, we will go through our members as well as introduce our KDE staff to each other. Then we will hear an overview of the Senate Bill 175, and talk a little bit about the process in which you will be looking at this work. you received several documents earlier for your review around the revision of assessment blueprints and their alignment to the Kentucky academic standards. And so you'll be hearing a little bit about that. And then there will be an opportunity for you to ask questions, and we'll try to give you those answers. And then lastly, you will be voting on this process, whether or not you feel that the work has been accomplished, if you feel like it is done well. And you will vote, each of you will vote as to it being sufficient or deficient. And you will call your vote out orally. And then after that oral vote, then we ask you to go back into your Google folders and find a form to place your vote and to email that back. And more directions will be given to you as we go through this process. So at this time, as you can see, the agenda is in front of you. We do need to have a motion, second, and vote by the members to approve the agenda as presented. So I will entertain a motion from the members.
I make the motion. Erin Milburn.
Erin Milburn has made a motion. Do I hear a second?
Jack Jacobs, I'll second.
All right. At this time, if all of you are in favor of that, if you will indicate so by raising your hand on your bar in front of you. Okay, good, great. All right, the motion has carried for proceeding with our agenda. So next on the agenda is opening remarks, and I am going to turn it over to Rhonda Sims, who is the Associate Commissioner for the Office of Assessment and Accountability, and she also is the Associate Commissioner for the Office of Teaching and Learning until that vacancy in our at the Kentucky Department is filled. So Rhonda, I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Thank you, Joy. Thank you, everyone, for being willing to spend a little time with us this afternoon. As you'll learn more about this as we go through the day, this completes a really very long-term process and project, starting back with creation of new standards, and we're going to go through a little bit of information and PowerPoint with you around that. But this particular committee, your role is to sort of look at the process we've used. And ultimately, you're going to make a decision, is it sufficient or deficient? If it's deficient, we kind of have to go back and restart again. If it's sufficient, then we move forward with the work and the blueprints become finalized. We followed the creation of the blueprint model in the same way that the standards were done, the same sort of processes. Now, that being said, you've noticed we've been very formal with you today because you are a governor-appointed committee. We have a requirement to have an open meeting, to have a certain structure in place for the meetings, and we're using the exact same structure that was used when groups were brought together to work on the standards. So that's why this is formalized. It wouldn't seem quite as formal, I think, if we were all together in a room with each other, but obviously that's not the way we work these days. And but that's the reason we have the very formal structure. We would have had an agenda anyway, but that's the taking of the vote and doing all things so that we are legally in compliance. And really today, I'm sort of serving as a designee for Interim Commissioner Brown, because technically the report will go from him to the Kentucky Board of Education, reflecting what you've discussed today. Now, that being said, you kind of have, sort of an up or down sort of vote eventually in this process. But I want you to keep in mind that the department is always open. We're open in this office and with my OTL partners at the moment to improving our processes. So we appreciate the feedback that you'll be able to share with us today, even though you'll kind of formally take a stance on what you're hearing about. We want to welcome that feedback, encourage it, and you represent a really great variety of individuals that are part of our education stakeholder community, and some of you come with a specific content background. So we know based on either your general background or administrative background content, you may have some very specific questions around something related to the standards. And while your role is not to evaluate the standards or recommend a recommendation to the standard or percentage on the blueprint, we still want you to have your questions answered. So that's why we've invited a number of KDE people to join us today who would have the expertise to answer those questions. But again, your focus in terms of what will eventually be the record of vote is really about, is the process we're going through with you today, does it seem a sufficient process, or did you have concerns to the level of saying it's deficient? And again, all along the way, we want you to ask your questions. And we're going to pause periodically for those. And we also want you to offer feedback if you have ways that you think this could be improved, because we will have sort of a continuing process as standards are revised and blueprint. We've talked about merging the blueprint development more with the standards development and still fulfilling all these processes, but we will still have this opportunity to interact with our content standards as well as interact with this development of the blueprint. And we're going to go through to talk about what does a blueprint do as well. So again, just appreciate so much your time. I know several of you are probably trying to take a little time off, even though vacations may seem a little different these days, and we appreciate your doing that. And we're going to move efficiently through the work today, but please be available for that feedback and for those questions you might have. And then at the end, we'll ask you to take that more formal vote and structure. So again, I'll pause there to see if you have any initial questions getting started. And the formality of the meeting is one reason we've asked you as members to keep your camera on. And I know we have one issue with one person in the camera, but she's following along in chat. But that's the reason we've asked you to do that. Now, to save, as you heard at the beginning, if you came on early, to save bandwidth, we're going to at KDE turn our cameras on and off, because the more bandwidth that we're taking up on the system, the more difficult it'll be to advance the PowerPoint slides and some things like that. So at times you'll just hear our voices, but we wanted to let you see us and I almost feel like we're all in our natural habitat these days. We're either out on our porches, or we're in our home offices, or maybe we're in our kitchens. I'm in my kitchen, but you know, we obviously are communicating from home much more, or maybe your office at work. So let me pause there to see if anybody has any kind of opening questions for me, and then we'll start kind of finishing up our introductions, and then we'll move into the meat of the meeting. And then you always, if you do have a question, you can take yourself off mute to ask it, or if it's convenient, you can raise your hand, either so we see you on camera or the little electronic hand that you use to vote. Also, we'll be monitoring chat, so if anybody has any chat, I see that my Dr. Stacy put up no questions, so appreciate that, Mike. And so, again, we'll just kind of move forward with the work today. And you will be referenced. We sent you several things in advance. Michael Hackworth, who works directly with me, and you're going to meet in a minute, has sent you out some links to Google folders, the report, lots of things in advance that you've had a chance to kind of pursue a little bit on your own time, and we'll be referencing those later in the session as well. So I will pause there, Joy, and kick it back to you for you to continue with our introductions. And thank you very much, Joy, for facilitating today.
Thank you, Rhonda. I do want to see, I think we have someone speaking. I'm sorry. Okay. We do have the entire group, 100% in attendance today. I see Mary Lee Lewis now is available, as well as Jeannie Smith. So welcome, welcome. And at this time, we're going to be doing some just very brief introductions. We want to meet you, see your face, and have you tell us your name and the organization, where you're from, and the group that you are representing on this committee, if you know. And then after you as members introduce yourselves, and we're going to do it alphabetically, then we will also let the KDE members introduce themselves as well. So I will call your name, just like in school, and then you, if you will state your name, your full name, and again, where just a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and the group you're representing. So Dr. Deanna Ashby.
Good afternoon. I'm Deanna Ashby, and I'm the superintendent of Hopkins County Schools. And I'm one of 2 superintendents serving on the committee, and just want to say thank you to all the KDE folks for your hard work on this. I know it's been a long process, and we appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Professor Jacqueline Burnside. I believe you're on mute there. Thank you.
My finger touched more than one button. Jackie Burnside. I'm a professor of sociology at Berea College in Berea, Kentucky, but I'm here representing the Berea Independent School Board as a school board member.
All right, thank you. Dr. Jack Jacobs.
Hello, I'm Jack. I'm in Louisville, Kentucky at Jefferson County Public Schools. I'm a principal in an elementary school. It's Bloom Elementary, and I'm excited to be here and help out as much as I can. Thanks.
Thank you. Chris Lamons.
Good afternoon. I'm Chris Lamons. I am the K-12 principal at Bergen Independent. It's in Mercer County. I'm honored to be serving on this committee with you guys. I appreciate it.
Mary Lee Lewis.
Good afternoon. I'm glad to be on video. I think you can see me now. Is that correct?
Yes.
I'm very honored to be a part of this committee, and I am a high school science teacher at Boyd County High School. This will be my 27th year of teaching.
Thank you so much. Erin Milburn.
Hi, everybody. I teach English at Mercer County Senior High School. I teach at Campbellsville University, and I am the ELA representative for the state. Glad to be here.
Thank you. Philip Prokes.
My name is Phil Prokes. I teach high school math here at East Jessamine High School in Jessamine County, and this will be my 10th year teaching, and I guess I'm representing every math teacher in the state. So looking forward to being on the committee.
Thank you. Jeannie Smith. I believe you're on mute, hon.
Okay.
There, okay.
Okay, sorry about that. I'm Jeannie Smith. I'm a James Madison Fellow, and I teach 7th grade social studies in Warren County at Drakes Creek Middle School. And I'm really excited to be a part of this. Thanks.
Thank you. And Dr. Mike Stacy.
Yeah, Mike Stacy, current superintendent of Beechwood Independent Schools. I've been there, this is my 6th year. And I guess I should also tell Jeannie, I'm AP Euro teacher. So I teach AP Euro every other year. So I'll be doing that again this year. I missed last year, so this remote stuff, I'm going to need a lot of support. So anyway, nice to join you guys, and look forward to the meeting.
Well, welcome. Welcome to all of you. And I'm so thrilled that all of you were able to participate in our meeting today. Now we're going to quickly introduce the KDE people that are that are going to either be presenting or are available for question and answers. And again, these are going to be in alphabetical order as well. So I'm going to start just so they can, because again, my name is Joy Barr. So I'm up near the front of the alphabet. And I am a consultant in the Office of Assessment and Accountability. And I am your facilitator for the day. And if you have any questions, throughout this, make sure that you either just speak up and again, state your name, and raise your hand and we'll respond, or you can put the question into chat, which we are monitoring. So, Erin.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Erin Chavez. I work in the Division of Program Standards with the Office of Teaching and Learning, and I had the opportunity to help facilitate the math assessment blueprint. Very nice to meet you all. Thank you for being here.
Maggie.
Hi, everyone. I'm Maggie Doyle, and I'm also an academic program consultant in the Division of Program Standards in the Office of Teaching and Learning. And I, along with Erin, helped facilitate the math assessment blueprint from the secondary perspective. So it's nice to virtually meet you all.
Lauren.
Hello, everyone. I am Lauren Galicchio, and I am an academic program consultant with the Office of Teaching and Learning who works with social studies. Nice to meet you, and thank you all for being here today.
Michael.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Michael Hackworth. I'm the Executive Advisor to the Office of Assessment and Accountability. Thank you all so much for your time. You have received several emails from me, and I look forward to our meeting today. And again, I appreciate each and every one of you so much.
Whitney.
Good afternoon. I'm Whitney Hamilton, and I am an academic program consultant in the Division of Program Standards, which is in the Office of Teaching and Learning. I work primarily with the elementary reading and writing standards, and I was able to facilitate that work for the reading writing blueprint. Nice to be here.
Kelly.
Hi, I'm Kelly Philbeck, and I am the secondary literacy consultant with the Office of Teaching and Learning, and I help facilitate the work with the reading and writing blueprint. So I'm very excited to work with you all today, and thank you for your time.
Pam.
Hello, I'm Pam Powers. I'm in the Office of Assessment and Accountability. I work with Joy and Rhonda, and I'm here facilitating your materials that you'll be seeing on the screen.
Heather.
Hello, I'm Heather Ransom. I am an academic program consultant with the Office of Teaching and Learning, and I work with social studies. And thank you all for being here.
Mickey.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mickey Ray, and I am the Policy Advisor for the Office of Teaching and Learning. It's a pleasure to be here. It's nice to be amongst people during this time, and thank you for being here as well.
Rhonda.
My camera back on. I was able to speak with you a little bit earlier. I am Rhonda Sims, and I am the Associate Commissioner in the Office of Assessment and Accountability, and temporarily also being the Associate over the Office of Teaching and Learning, which is also a fine group of individuals to work with on a daily basis. So obviously our office is charged with anything related to state required assessments, and we have a structure with the accountability systems as well. And, you know, we're in interesting times with waivers and assessments not being administered, and but our work continues, and we continue to push forward looking for the new year, just as you are at the school level and getting ready for that. Jennifer Stafford, you'll meet in a second, is our director that leads all the communication work and interaction with staff in OAA, and then Kevin Hill, who's not on the call, leads the division of data and all of the work around reporting. So again, thanks so much. I think we'll have a good conversation today, and interested to hear your thoughts and feedback as we move forward. Thank you, Joy.
And Jennifer.
Good afternoon, everyone. I echo Rhonda's
comments that we appreciate so much you being part of this committee. It's an important step that we're taking today. And we just so appreciate you taking time out of your schedule, whether you're on vacation or at your house. We just really appreciate because the work started over a year ago, and we look forward to this process and coming to some conclusion to it. So again, thank you very much. I'm Jennifer Stafford. I'm the director in the Division of Assessment Accountability Support. We work in our division directly with district assessment coordinators on the communication of the accountability system and the implementation of the assessment system. So again, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, everyone, for those nice introductions. I do want to let you know that we have two people in the background, Andrew and Megan, who are our video, if you will, producers. They are recording this session for us. It is available via our KDE Media portal. So I want to call attention to them that they are busily working behind the scenes. And there may be some others that are listening in to this meeting as well. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Rhonda, Jennifer, and Michael for the overview of Senate Bill 175. And Pam, if you can pull up the PowerPoint at this time.
Great. Thank you, Pam. So we want to spend some time walking you through what Senate Bill 175 in 2019 requires of the department around standards. And the standards both that we use for instruction as well as what is used to develop the state assessments, the summative assessment, and then how the blueprint, which is used to drive the creation of the test, how that piece also fits into the process. And you'll notice the PowerPoint title is Assessment Alignment Adjustment Process. And so your role in the SPARC committee, SAPRC, fits into this process. In fact, you're that final piece, that final step. And so we want to walk you through a good understanding of what SB1 requires of us and how we have gone about trying to meet those requirements and facilitate those and implement them. And obviously along the way, that's where we think you might have even some improvements and suggestions. So we'll go ahead and move right through this. I'm going to do about the first 3 slides or so, and then Jennifer and Michael, who've worked more deeply in the daily operation of the process, will also join and talk through that. So to begin with, SB 175 requires that there be a revision process. And we've had various points in time where we've had some statutory language requiring some sort of rotation of standards. Because you know at the classroom level and administrative level, and those of you who are working in supports of schools like our school board member, that education is not a static thing. We don't find this one perfect document and then we freeze it forever, because we need to be responsive to what our students need and the global changes we experience and this in-state changes, national changes, and certainly we're living in the middle of such a change right now. So really the law requires of us that we implement this process for the standards, and then we align the assessments to the standards. We do that through the blueprint. We also have activities during the development of the assessment where we have individual teachers looking at individual items to make sure that alignment is working to the standards. We do some oversight of that of the department as well, and our vendor is charged to make sure that those corresponding connections are happening. Obviously, part of this process is, do we need possible revisions at various points to the standards and to the blueprint? And we've had a lot of steps getting to today to collect that information, and you'll hear about those today. The goal is obviously that our students, when they leave the K-12 environment, are ready for the next step in life, whether that be a post-secondary formalized education, or further in training, or whether it means moving into the work of world and adulthood. And so we want to make sure that our students meet the global standards that we know all students need, as well as what our state might need with career and technical education. So this language is lifted from the statute. And then this next step is really, how do we get to this charge of making sure we revise assessment standards and instructional standards. They really are our academic standards that drive both things. And then how do we make sure we have a blueprint that's capturing for the test what we need of those standards, and keeping all of those things tightly aligned and connecting through our various processes with teachers and giving opportunity for that feedback. So Pam, if we move on to the second slide, there are two main committee structures that were used to make sure we could accomplish this work and facilitate it. And again, this was used as the standards themselves were developed, and we've used and mirrored the same process as the blueprints were developed for the test. So the committee uses something called a review committee, and we've in education, we have to have an abbreviation for everything. So we've referred to those many times as RCs. So review committees. There shall be 4 of those going along with 4 of our major content areas, the reading and writing, math, science, social, all the major content area groups. So 4 standards and assessment review committees. Each committee needed 6 public teachers, 2 representatives from higher ed, and someone from business and industry. So you'll see that consistent pattern. Just like we had formal structure with you today, all of these committees that met with the development of the standards and the blueprint, we also did this same formal structure with minutes, with roll call, with meeting a quorum, all of those pieces that are kind of required as we do public open meetings. Each committee member had to be someone who was teaching actively in their subject area. And obviously, the legislation did not want people who might have some sort of connection to a vendor that might be charged with helping produce curriculum that's purchased in the state, curriculum support documents, or an assessment vendor. So important that teacher be connected very much to the school process and to their content area, and obviously bringing forward that expertise. The next slide talks about the second committee. So we have review committees, RCs. The next committee that we have is what we would identify as APs, advisory panels. There were 3 advisory panels, and all of these, again, is legislative language in the statute. And those advisory panels were assigned to review the work then of the RCs, and the panels were structured to be grade bands. So K-5, 6-8, and 9-12. And on each advisory panel, again, we needed our 6 teachers, active in the classroom teachers, and then a representative, again, from higher education. Some of our higher ed reps across time have been connected to the colleges of ed, and sometimes they've been connected to content-based instruction at the university level, and then our business and industry representatives. So using the structure of RCs and APs, we accomplished both the work several years ago of all of the standards, but then in this year, we've been focusing on creating the blueprints that keep everything aligned. So at this point, I think I'm turning over to Jennifer Stafford, who's going to pick this up to talk a bit about your role specifically as this committee.
Thank you, Rhonda. As Rhonda mentioned, the AP and RC committees were developed and held their committee and had feedback from all the members, which leads us to your committee, the Standards and Assessment Process Review Committee. And it was established by the statute, Senate Bill 150 or 175, that includes teachers in language arts, math, science, social studies, 2 superintendents, and 1 local school board member. So you see why we have each of you here representing those different role groups. So this process was meant to be a transparent process that allowed all Kentuckians to participate and have an opportunity to have input on the assessment blueprints. it was our charge to make sure that we held those committees, that we are following the statute as it was written, and facilitate the work going forward. Looking at slide 5, Pam, we're now to the point that we're holding our meeting with you all, and the commissioner is charged with creating a report to you that outlines that process. Now, the report, you have access to it. It includes a timeline and a public feedback and responses. So that report that's available to you is called the Senate Bill 175, 2019 Requirement, Assessment, Alignment, and Adjustment Process for Reading and Writing, Math, and Social Studies. That report begins with some brief introduction statements about the revision process of academic standards and corresponding assessments. It has a timeline that we're going to review momentarily, as well as the process overview. It has the different phases that we have completed within the last year. So with that report, we have provided detailed information about the process. We've also gotten feedback from the Interim Joint Education Committee on Education, and we presented to them last fiscal year. So we'll talk more about that. So looking, Pam, at slide 6. So after reviewing the commissioner's report, this committee shall give us feedback about whether the stakeholders had adequate opportunity to provide input on the standards and corresponding alignment of state assessments. You're either going to say, yes, we followed the process, or no, we didn't follow the process. And if you find it sufficient that we followed the process, then we will continue on to the Kentucky Board of Education at their August meeting to provide information to them on your recommendation. Now, slide 7. Your role is to review that report. So we hope that you have had the opportunity to look at that report and ensure that the stakeholders provided input, that the comments, you saw the comments from the members of the AP and RC committees, as well as the reflection of their work in the assessment blueprint, and then to forward a recommendation to the Kentucky Board of Education. Now, moving along, Pam, to slide 8, the process that we took is to align the assessment blueprints to the actual standards. So the standards, when we go to develop them, we develop what's called a blueprint. Much like a builder would go and have a house plan, they would look at the house plan and in that blueprint would have measurements of the floors, where specific load-bearing walls would be, where structural walls would be, and so forth. Much like a builder would take a blueprint to a house and create and build the house, in assessment, we take a assessment blueprint and build the actual assessment from it. So the assessment blueprint has that purpose in mind, with the fact that we want the assessments to reflect the standards. So to get to from the standards to the assessment, we have the blueprint that guides the development of the assessments. So the members of the committees, the AP and RC committees, they went through the standards meticulously. The ladies over in OTL, the content specialists that are here on this meeting with us, they talked through each of the standards, how they were aligned, how they were formatted. They talked through in depth with these members about that. The members then made recommendations to the blueprint, because we want the assessments to align to the standards. and be closely knit to the standards. So those blueprints are very important to make that connection. Another purpose of the blueprint is for instructional purposes, because the blueprint is shared publicly, and it's shared with instructional leaders and administrators in the local building. Parents can get, those are very public documents. And when a teacher goes to develop their lessons and develop, the emphasis within their classroom, then they can use those blueprints to see the relative values and the relative weights within the standards. So it helps instructionally as well. So those are two different purposes, one for instructional and then the other for creation of the actual assessments. Pam, if you would move on to slide 9. So we take those blueprints. Those blueprints are then shared with our custom vendor, and right now that's Pearson. So we take those blueprints and help guide the development of the actual test items. So they serve as the targets, because you will see percentages in each of those content areas with the content and then the sub content or the sub content areas, so that blueprint drives the assessment development and how many items are developed for each of those content areas. So it really does drive the construction of the assessments. So to get there, Pam, if you move to slide 10, to get there, then we had an assessment review process. And this is a process that Michael Hackworth led for over a year now. And it started literally last July, and with our first meeting. So the first step was the committees were formed, and I'm going to go through each of these steps because each of these steps are really important so that you see that we met the intent of the law. So the committees were formed, the review committees and the advisory panels. So each of those review committees were by content, by level. So reading and writing, math, social studies, they each had our APs and RCs by their different levels. The public comments after were sought, and we had a third party that collected those for us. That was from the ARC. They are called the ARC, and they collected those comments for us. Then the AP considered all of those comments. We've got a lot of comments from those first set of blueprints. Then we moved into the RC review of the AP's recommendations. So the APs met, and then the advisory panels, then the review committees met to talk about the advisory panel's recommendations and made decisions on moving forward. Then after that, we put it back out, the blueprint back out for public comment. And so it went out a second time by the ARC. We gathered those comments. We took those comments back to the advisory panels. They considered the comments and finalized the revisions. Went to the review committees for each of those different content areas for recommendations to move forward. Then we moved into presentation at the Interim Joint Committee on Education and talked with the members there. They had several questions, and we provided them the information, much of which you're going to see today, because we used these specific slides with them. We're here now over on the top right-hand side, and we are with you. The commissioner has provided the report to you all, and today we are determining if the process is sufficient. After today, we'll take the recommendation to the Kentucky Board of Education, in their August meeting, and then continue with creation of the new assessments then for the upcoming 2021 school year. Let's look now, Pam, at slide 11. So here's the timeline for all of those. So we called for applications to those AP and RC meetings on April 1st. The first information went out about it. The first round of public feedback by the ARCC committee then, or the vendor, was gathered May 22nd through the 21st, 2019. The first AP meetings was literally a year ago today on July 8th. Then after the AP meetings, the RCs looked at their comments on July 25th, had the second round of public feedback August 6th through September 5th, because we wanted to give plenty of time for that process so that everyone would have adequate time to review the blueprints and provide feedback. That second round of feedback went to APs September 23rd and 24th. Then the review committees met October 21st, 25th, and November 1st. The interim joint committee was, we presented on November 20th of last year. And then today is the assessment review committee. So that's a little bit about the timeline, the process that we use, the statute, as well as the report. So let me pause at this time and see if you have any questions before I hand it over to Michael.
Jennifer, this is Joy. We have had a comment in chat. Okay. A question that maybe you or Michael can answer. Can you tell us how many respondents were in each round, the AP and RCs? I think I saw 125 in the second round of public comment, but not the first.
So I would need to defer to Michael for the number.
So we have included in the Google folders, in Google folder number 5, the ARC feedback that they received. There were 2 public comment periods, each that lasted for 30 days. You will be able to see all of the data that is in that work. The ARC took that data and they broke it down for us. As far as specifically knowing the number of comments we received quite a few. I would not know the exact number, but I would encourage you to go out into those Google folders, and in number 5, you will see the comments that were collected from the public and how the ARC committee broke those comments down to share with the advisory panels and the review committees.
Jackie Burnside with a question. It was good to hear that there was a second round and that the AP and RC were able to look at the comments that had come. In lieu of a third round, how were things reconciled? Did the members in the RC group and the AP group feel that they had reached some kind of consensus or recognition about the feedback?
By the end of the second round, they had pretty much come up with consensus. You know, we posted the blueprints for public comment for 30 days. The AP came back. They looked at those comments. You know, they made edits to the blueprints where they felt that they needed to be edited. And then by the time they got to the review committees in the second round, By that time, there was very little change to the blueprints to the way they were. So at that time, the committee felt that they were ready to be recommended to the commissioner and to move forward so that the assessments could be developed.
Thank you. If nobody else has their hand up, just a follow-up question to the next one. Some of the comments that I was looking at in the from the survey that went, there were some suggestions at the end that seemed like maybe bigger ideas than what this process was set up to deal with. Does the review group have a way for those kind of very helpful looking but too big for the scope of this group, those ideas to be going forward in some way, recognizing that they came out of this process, but they are not going to be able to be dealt with in this process, but you don't want them to be lost?
I'll make one comment that might help with this, and then that might help respond, Jackie, and then someone who's with our OTL group may have something to add. I think one of the values of having our program standards group involved heavily in this process was that, for instance, you've met a number of people today who've introduced themselves as I work with reading language arts, I work with social studies, I work with mathematics. So by having that connection, comments, particularly comments that were related to content specific things, then they become known to the group that's helping also develop modules for instruction around those standards. So there could be things that would flag that would help influence a bit sort of the PD work moving forward and the information. For instance, if there's a couple of questions and it seems like maybe there's a little confusion about a standard. What did that standard really mean? Or what's the emphasis? Because sometimes I think what you're seeing is the comments that came in were not necessarily related to the blueprint as much as I want to tell you something about the standard. And that's that bigger idea comment. So I think by having our group that really sort of are the keepers of the standards and the helpers of understanding the standards and the creating of the PD modules around the standards, I think it helps to connect some of those comments back when they can be something that could be addressed in that process. So I don't know if anyone else, if Mickey or one of the other content consultants, if that is something you would think is a possibility or not, that with what I've just shared.
Sure. And Rhonda, you just stole all my thunder. So that's absolutely right. So because the consultants were able to be a part of those meetings, we were able to see that feedback. Not only that, but Michael allowed us to have copies of the feedback. And so that was able to inform our work on the OTL side moving forward, just as Rhonda said, in correcting any misconceptions. That was extremely informative to us in terms of professional learning or guidance documents that are created. So we have all of those, and that does inform our work as we move forward, and that is certainly ongoing. So thank you.
You're welcome. As you can hear in the background, I really have stolen the thunder. We're having here, so you can hear the thunder in the background.
Thank you both. Yeah, that's good to know.
You're welcome. And I think one other thing to keep in mind is, sometimes someone will think about like the content standards and want to suggest a change when you've actually kind of completed that round of review process. But keep in mind, it isn't a static doc. It's not going to stay exactly the same forever. And there will be another round coming up. It's down the road a ways. These are kind of 6-year cycles. But still, it could be that the more immediate work is what we've just described. But also, we tend to file those things away, too, that obviously it could come up the next round of cycle as well. So a couple different ways that could have input there.
Okay. A couple of other comments that have come in. One was about the how was public feedback sought and advertised, and then Chris found that answer. And he said he found it in the documents that he was that he had received. Jack says that it looks like the first round was completed by 84 respondents. And Jennifer, so that is the only questions that have come in through chat.
Well, thank you all for those questions. And if you continue to have questions, please continue to put those in chat for us and we'll respond. But at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Michael, who's going to talk about the committees and the applications that we've had, and then the continuing with the blueprint. So, Michael?
All right, thank you. So now that Rhonda and Jennifer have discussed the statute, the purpose of the assessment blueprints, the KDE review process, and the timeline of the work, let's now look at the call for committee members, public feedback, along with what the blueprints look like now for those three content areas. The Kentucky Department of Education solicited applicants through an online survey that was posted for 30 days. At the end of the posting, 215 applications were received, and you can see on this slide the distribution of where the applicants came from. We worked a lot with the co-ops, and so this bar graph shows the different co-ops within Kentucky and the percentage of applicants that came from those regions throughout the state. At the end of the posting, 215 applicants applied throughout the state. The online survey was advertised through various distribution lists, emails, and communication channels, such as our co-ops. KDE then used a rubric, and we called that rubric KASAB. It's KASAB. That stands for Knowledge, Attitude, Skills, Aspirations, and Behavior, to select the participants that would participate in the advisory panels and the review committees. Next slide, please. As required by statute, the process that KDE followed was very open and transparent that allowed all Kentuckians an opportunity to participate. As Jennifer mentioned earlier, an independent third party, ARCC, which stands for the Appalachia Regional Comprehensive Center, was used to collect and transmit the comments received to the department. This vendor had no prior or current affiliation with a curriculum or assessment resource vendor as required by the statute. The ARC posted blueprints for each posting period for 30 days each. Next slide. While the blueprints were posted for public comment, the public had an opportunity to provide both positive and negative feedback. As we've already mentioned, you can see the feedback in the ARC reports that are located in the Google Docs under tab 5. After public comment, the advisory panels and review committees met and were able to review all public comments during the public comment period, and they were able to make the adjustments at the time that they felt were needed. Next slide. Now let's take a look at some respondent roles, examples of public feedback, and what blueprints look like now for reading and writing, social studies, and mathematics. This slide right here shows the number of respondents that we received when the blueprints were out for public comment. As you can see, the majority of respondents were teachers, over half, a little over half were teachers, and we had some retired teachers that even, contributed to the comments. Administrators, we had quite a few. When
It appears that Michael has frozen. His computer may have frozen up for a minute. Jennifer, do you want to pick up?
Sure. Let me pull up where
He's on slide 15, respondent roles, reading and writing.
Okay, sure. So you can see from the percentages there for each role that we had for the feedback. So you can see that teachers were overwhelmingly interested in the assessment blueprints, because we got over 50% of those comments from teachers. We actually had retired teachers who were also interested in those assessment blueprints. And you can see administrators and parents and then the state education agency partners. We would call those our K groups, or our possibly our co-ops would review those as well. So we did get a good bit of feedback from that. So Pam, if you'll go on to slide 16. So the public feedback, you will see that at least 89%, 89.31% of respondents felt that the domain levels were okay as is. I think I referred to them earlier as sub-content areas, but those were domains, but they were okay as is. 86%, just a bit over that, respondents felt that it was the prompt mode for writing was okay as well. The blueprint was easy to read. 96.2% of respondents felt that they were easy, and then 94.94% thought they were easy to understand. So we felt really good about the feedback that we were getting on both our reading and writing blueprints. Continuing on to slide 17, as I mentioned earlier, the assessment blueprint has two purposes: to create the assessments, but then also instructional purposes. So a good percentage, almost 77% of our respondents felt like it provided instructional guidance to teachers. Then the 85, just a bit over 85% of respondents thought that the domains on the blueprints provide valuable information for schools to help them inform the writing program overall. So that was a good bit of positive feedback. You can see on slide 18 the format of the blueprint. So for reading blueprint, you can see that the domains were key ideas and details, craft and structure, and integration of knowledge and ideas. Then moving over to the right, you can see the percentage of domain and the coverage target. So you can see at each grade level where the assessment is given, and that is for reading and writing, for reading, that's 3 through 8, and then at high school at grade 10. So each of those domains remain the same, and then you can see the coverage then reflected in the assessments. The distribution of passage types. So they thought it was important to have the types of passages that the students would incur. So it's both a literary target as well as informative targets. So you can see the distributions of those targets within those reading blueprint. Moving along to slide 19, the writing blueprint. The writing is assessed at grades 5, 8, and 11. So it looks a little different than the reading blueprint because of the different grade levels. So for on-demand writing, you can see that the grade 5, the mode is opinion, and I'm looking at that table for on-demand writing, and the percentage of that domain is obviously 100% for each of those modes. At grade 5 would be opinion, grade 8 would be argumentative, and also at grade 11 would be argumentative. The editing mechanics is also assessed at grades 5, 8, and 11, and the prompt mode and the percentage of domain targets there are demonstrated on slide 19. Let me pause at this time and see if Michael has rejoined us. And if not, I will continue. I will continue.
Hi, Jennifer. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Jennifer, for picking up. I apologize. We do have a storm here as well, and I guess something happened with my service. So I can try to continue. So if you would like to move forward to slide 20. Our next content area that we want to discuss today is social studies. And as you can see, just like with the reading and writing slide, we have it broken down into who replied to the survey and provided us with comments. This particular subject area had a lot more teachers. We had over 72% of the comments were from teachers, but we still had retired teachers and administrators. We had a few parents and guardians respond to the surveys. So we're always happy when we have, especially parents who are involved with our work. So next slide, please. Here are just some examples of the feedback that we received. As you look at some of the surveys that went out, some of them, some of the items were listed where participants could mark them okay as is, okay. So at least 72% of the respondents agreed that the domain levels were okay as is. The blueprints were easy to read, over 98% agreed on that. And that's one of the things that we do want. We want the people, when they use blueprints, we want them user-friendly. We want them to be able so that people can easily read them and understand them. So we did have some really high percentage rates for both of those items. And then many felt that the domains of the blueprint provided the valuable information that schools needed to help the social studies program overall. So the next slide will show us an example of the social studies blueprint. It has the 4 domains: civics, economics, geography, and history listed on the left-hand side. And then social studies is an assessment that is assessed in each grade span. So in Kentucky, we administer the social studies assessment at grades 5, 8, and 11. So that is the example of where the social studies blueprint stands right now. Next slide, please. Now we move into mathematics. We have our intro slide that kind of gives the respondent roles. Again, we had a lot of teacher input, over 74%. We again still had some retired teachers and administrators and parents and guardians respond. Next slide, please. And again, here are some of the ways that the participants felt, whether they agreed, whether they strongly agreed. Again, we want blueprints that are easy to read and understand. We got the high percentage rate that was needed there. Many felt that the blueprint would provide instructional guidance to teachers, over 85%. And then many felt that the domains of the blueprint were able to provide the information to the schools that they needed to help the program. So slide 25. Now, the math blueprint is divided up. The first page of the math blueprint is divided into the grade spans for grades 3, 4, and 5. As you can see, there's language at the top that both the advisory panels and the review committees wanted to explain the purpose of the blueprint. and the domains of the Kentucky Academic Standards. So on this particular page of the blueprint, it relates to grades 3, 4, and 5. It shows the domains on the left-hand side, and then the target percentage for each of those domains for grades 3, 4, and 5. Then on slide 26, it moves into the middle school level. Again, the advisory panels and the review committees felt that the language at the top in the paragraph was very important for teachers, for instructional coaches, for instructional supervisors to have. And then the actual blueprint is set up very similar to the way it was in grades 3, 4, and 5, but this focuses on grades 6 and 7, where you have the domains listed. And then on the right-hand side, you have the target percentages for those domain items for grades 6 and 7. Slide 27 will focus on grade 8. There was a difference in the blueprint for grade 8 than in grade 6 and 7. So the committees wanted the grade 8 blueprint to be on a separate page because it was a little different from the other middle school. And of course, our middle school consultants who are aligned with us, can answer further questions regarding this blueprint and the work that was involved with it here in just a minute if you have any further questions. Slide 28, math assessment is administered at grade 10. That is the grade level at the high school that has been chosen to have this assessment administered. Again, we have our language at the top. It's consistent like we did with the other grade levels. For mathematics, we have the blueprint down at the bottom that has the conceptual categories listed. And then on the right-hand side, the target percentages for each of those conceptual categories for high school. Slide 29 moves away from what the actual blueprints look like and the comments that we received. But several weeks ago, each of you received an email, and within the email, there were links to the Google folders. And we had Google folders for each of the content areas, reading and writing, math, and social studies. And within those folders, you will see what we have listed on slide 30. Each one of those folders contains the application that we used, along with the applicants that were selected. We also included in those folders the rubric that we used to select the participants from the work. Remember, we received a high volume of applicants, over 200, 215 to be exact. So we wanted to be fair when we selected our participants. So we did use a rubric. We listed all the advisory panel and review committee participants. You will see rosters of people and their contact information and their affiliation with the panel that they were serving on. Any email communication that went out advertising that there will be a next advisory panel or review committee, what they needed to prepare for the meeting, those were all in email communications, and those can be found in the Google folders. Press releases, agendas, and minutes of the meetings, those are included as well. ARC reports, we've had several discussions already on the reports that ARC created for us. We were very fortunate to have these people do this work for us for free. They worked with our standards group so that they were familiar with the work, and we were able to mirror the process for the assessment blueprint. So they were very helpful in developing items to ask in the surveys, and then the reports they provided us back to share with the advisory panels and the review committees were very, very helpful and detailed. We've provided you with a copy of the final draft assessment blueprints, and we have just gone through what those blueprints look like. There is a folder from the Interim Joint Committee on Education. All the materials that we presented to them can be found there. And then, of course, we are now with you all, the Standards and Assessment Process Review Committee. All of the work for this meeting can be found in that Google folder. So at this time, Pam, if you will go to slide 31, we will open and entertain for any questions that you may have regarding any of the work.
And Michael, we have had several to come in through chat.
Okay.
So I'll, if you want to address those first, and then we will open it up to you to speak up as you have further questions.
Sure. Many of these we may need our curriculum specialist
exactly.
to answer. So, but we'll be happy to answer.
And some of them are being answered by the some of the consultants as well.
Okay.
So the from program standards, but I don't want to leave anybody that had any questions. I don't want to leave anything out. So back quite some way ago, we had a comment about could someone clarify the level of involvement and feedback by students? I saw that there was some representation in the respondent graphic in the ARCC report, but couldn't tell whether there was only one student involved or whether all the student respondents were 11th graders. Since this was a concern expressed by reviewers along the way, I was just seeking some clarification. And so we did have a response to that from Maggie Doyle that says, in addition to respondents varying by round of public comment, the number of respondents may also vary by content area. Those numbers may only represent one of the 4 content areas discussed, depending upon which report is being accessed. Then we have Jack says, Aaron, I think there were 2 0 students on both. Aaron commented, I saw 1 student included on the social studies report. And then the respondent graph for social studies does not match the one in the ARC report, which includes 1 11th grade student response. And it goes on with that. Chris, I noticed there was 0% response from higher ed for reading, writing, and math. Now, Mickey Ray, who is our the policy advisor, if you will, for the Office of Teaching and Learning, commented to these comments in chat. In the timeline slide, you will notice we had 2 rounds of public feedback. The slides here likely reflect the feedback from round 2. You were given copies of both rounds. And then Aaron says, since our job is to determine if the process was fair and responsive and concerns were expressed about student response, it is helpful for me to know that at least 1 student did respond with feedback in 1 subject. So at this time, if any of you want to address that further or I'll open it up to you to make further comments.
Joy, can I clarify something really quickly?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so my concern was this: as I was looking through the materials that you sent and looking for feedback, particularly from the review committees and the advisory panels and the other folks that were looking at the feedback and asking questions of the committees and of you all. The one thing that I saw that occurred a couple of times was the question about student response and how had student response been pursued, and had it been pursued, and was it pursued in any way other than through the districts and through the teachers and so forth. So that caught my eye. So I was looking therefore to see if there had been student response and didn't see it anywhere except for this one social studies report. And then I was just confused about whether or not it meant just 1 student had responded, because it said 100% 11th grade, or whether it was whatever students have responded had all been 11th graders. So that was the one thing that I was trying to follow through the whole process to see, was that concern that had been expressed along the way, had that been looked at, had there been any student response ultimately? And so that's what I was trying to clarify.
That was very helpful, and obviously people who are more aware of the responses might be able to add to that. But I will mention to you, we had a little bit of a sticky wicket here where students were concerned. You know, we used a third-party vendor, as we're required by law to do, to post the surveys. And the ARC, as Michael mentioned, they did it for free, which was nice. But, you know, we'd been willing to pay somebody if we needed to do that too. But the ARC is a federally funded regional service center for education agency. So they're charged, the ARC we're part of is charged with helping Kentucky and I think Virginia, West Virginia, Tennessee, sort of the Appalachian area of the country. I think one of the challenges, though, was because it was a third-party vendor, we couldn't specifically like reach out by email to students. So you got into kind of privacy sort of connection and issues. So, you know the way we are, many times something goes to all teachers, all public school teachers, all principals, all superintendents. We have these distribution lists, and we really are very limited with how we can go out to all kids. So that means we have to work through the structure of districts and schools to reach kids. Now, I think what it points out, though, because you all have been very consistent in asking about that, and we've had other questions come up about that, I think we're going to need to think out of the box moving forward. So when I talked about earlier feedback, I think we definitely need to see if there aren't some out of the box ways we could maybe address and reach kids more. Now, for instance, one thing that came to mind while you all were just talking is we now have a rather active student advisory group to the Department of Ed. They're mainly high school students. I think we might have an 8th grader in it. They rotate, they apply for the position. They're obviously meeting virtually. And they have become, with Intercommissioner Brown, also with our prior commissioners, they've become very active. So many times they have some great ideas of, well, how can you get the word out where kids are concerned? And so I think we're probably going to have to think a bit out of the box as we move forward, both with standards-oriented work, because I think the same question came up about standards as well as it did the blueprint. But we were a little challenged with that we couldn't reach out quite directly with students in the way that we could with teachers and principals and others. So I don't know if, Mickey, you worked a lot with the standards as well. Are there any other things around that you would add? Because I think this might be a great place where we can take away some good feedback, especially if you don't feel this has risen to the level of deficiency.
Absolutely. And that was an interesting thing that happened over the course of standards revision. So we noticed that by using that third-party vendor, we were not getting much student feedback. And again, as Rhonda pointed out, we could not elicit that feedback directly. But social studies, over the course of their process, they were able to, they learned from the earlier rounds of reading and writing and from mathematics. And so they were able to utilize student feedback more directly by way of focus groups and other things. In terms of the assessment blueprint, I think that just the nature of what this is, it would be more difficult for students to be as invested in that perhaps. But I do think that the advisory council connection is a good idea moving forward, because even if we're not able to utilize them specifically and ask them to complete the survey, they would know of ways that could be advertised that would hit a student population in a better way than just utilizing the commissioner's Monday message or the DAC email, or going out to principals and teachers in that way. So I think that is a good suggestion, and looking for other things, ways to be innovative to connect to student feedback moving forward.
I think another one we may want to consider, Pritchard has done a lot of work with student voice and have a number of active student groups that give feedback on a variety of education policy things. So there's no reason that as we move forward with tweaking this process, improving this process, keeping within the structure of what we're required by law to do, but there's some ways we can improve this and still meet within our requirement of the law. And so I think that might be some ways to go, since we can't quite go out and seek feedback in the same way with kids. They make
since this will be every 6 years.
We have a hand, Jeannie, if you would like to state your question.
Yes, thank you. I think first of all, I'd just like to say a huge thank you to everybody who's done all this work up to this point. I feel like I definitely got on a committee with the easiest job. So thanks for that. This is more of an observation. I noticed with the comment periods for both of them, the comment periods were the end of the school year and the very beginning of the school year. And that's not enough to make me think that the process hasn't been okay. But I think going forward, the time of public comment should be more within the school year, so that we get greater participation. The data showed obviously that teachers were very invested and wanted to contribute. And I think we would get even more participation if those comment periods were shifted a little bit, maybe September, October, January, February, something like that, so that it's not the closing of school and the opening of school. That's just when we're the busiest. So that's kind of my 2 cents on that. Because I think the more respondents you have, the better off we're going to be. So I just kind of wanted to put that in there for the future going forward.
Thank you. We appreciate that one.
Jackie Burnside here. I was just going to add on with those 2 comments, and the superintendent had one in the chat about the student advisory when you mentioned it, when Rhonda mentioned it. Our superintendent has a student advisory group, I think high school and middle school. So it's probably getting to be more common with lots of superintendents. And if there's a way that KDE can use that for information, and then whoever you are using for the third party, just relay the information that comes to you onto that party, would be a big help.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I hadn't even thought about the fact that many districts now and schools have a council group as well. So there might be a way to connect some way through leadership, through either a DAC, district assessment coordinators around the state, or principal superintendent, some way through the administrative effort to get that down into the level of the kids, at least in those advisories. That would certainly increase the student awareness a lot more. That'd be a good place to start.
Yes, I appreciate you mentioning that, because we also have some superintendents and local boards of education have included students as members on their local boards of education. So those members that are on that are students on local boards of education would actually have good input also. So thank you for bringing that forward.
Okay.
I was going to move to a different topic when you're ready.
Okay, go ahead, please.
On the slides that you were showing near the end, with the percentages for the content areas, I was really pleased to see the ones that were in the 90s, in the 80s, but the couple that were in the 70s sometimes lagged as much as 10% or more behind the other positive comments. So I'm just curious, does that seem okay for, pretty good for the effort, or what ideally would you like to see for those? And in particular, for example, the reading and writing, the 76.9%. The social studies was the domain levels being okay were 72%, which I think might have been the lowest of them all. So how did the group feel about those lower ones compared to the stellar 90s and upper 80s that you'd gotten?
I'll start this, and then the content people might be best to speak to it. I think what it reflects to some degree is the agreement on the standards themselves. Because, you know, the blueprint becomes a bit of a subset of the standards, or as Jennifer described very nicely, it helps us build the test. But it does use the standards as the materials for building the test. And so social studies had more feedback where there were differences. You know, there's a lot of content in social studies, and some of the new standards also move the content around a bit by grade as well. So I think this is in line with maybe some of the comments we received when the standards were going under revision with social studies. I think there's just been much more agreement overall with reading and writing and math than there has been with social studies. There's a little more controversy at times within social studies. And of course, we don't have science yet. We'll be going through this process with science down the road. So that's another area that tends to get some real differences among teachers and administrators with what should be addressed at what particular, sorry, I thought I had my camera on, at what particular point in time. Now, I don't know if our social studies people or Mickey, who kind of worked a lot with the work, if you think that has an impact of why we're seeing a difference there in social studies on the blueprint.
So I can take the social studies comment. Hello, everyone. This is Lauren Galicchio. I said hello earlier. Whoever is in control of the PowerPoint, if you could throw that back up on the screen, that might inform our conversations a bit better.
So Pam, I think if you could bring that up. And then Joy, I think we've got one more comment or two maybe in chat to come back to.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, great.
So, sorry, when you were looking at the public feedback in any of the content areas, and I obviously am here to speak to social studies, this is a reflection. This is a higher level reflection of what the actual comments said. So to really understand these points, like the 72%, the 98%, you really have to get in the comments and see exactly what people are talking to. So one of the things that if you look at specifically at that first bullet that you mentioned, it says 72 respondents agreed that the domain levels are okay as is. And I think to Rhonda's point, they are the discussion, and you can see this in the meeting minutes, you can see this in the documents that the committees both recorded their feedback on, that there was a lot of healthy democratic discourse about the weight that each of the content areas should have within the blueprint. So if you saw earlier when I think Michael or Jennifer, I apologize, I don't remember who had the slide at the time, we're talking about the different domain levels in social studies, it's equally divided. Well, some people feel very passionately that maybe one domain should be higher than the other. However, the ultimate goal of the legislation that I think, again, I apologize, Michael or Jennifer or Rhonda spoke to earlier, is that the blueprint has to align to the standards document. And so the CAS for Social Studies actually requires that all four disciplines, and if you aren't familiar with the document, it's civics, economics, geography, and history. Those are the content domains, thank you, of the CAS for Social Studies, and those have to be equal weight. That's the equal weight within the document. So according to the CAS for Social Studies, civics cannot be more important than economics, nor geography more important than history, and the various combinations of that. So what the committee was charged with, both committees, when they go in and they see this data, they have to go in and they say, they don't just look at the percentage, they look at actually what the comments are of the people who have responded, and they as a group have to, again, engage in that wonderful, healthy democratic discourse and come to a consensus about the data that is provided. So the 72%, again, you have the committee's responses to that, but they were able to really go in and say, okay, what exactly is this comment reflecting to? What is it talking about? And what are some of the specific information contained in the comments about that okay as is. So the committee was able to use the data from the comments provided. They were actually able to use some of the comments provided from the public feedback, their knowledge of the document, to help inform their decisions as to respond to the domain levels and in the creation of the blueprint. Does that help answer your question?
That is a nice help. Thank you. That leads me to think, especially with science coming up, are there some ideas for how to mine that healthy democratic range of discussion about what ideally would be best practices in that content area, so that when science is in that position, if they see that it's like 72% on the domain, then they can tweak at their review and advisory rounds to get it closer to the upper 80s that they've done so well with the others.
This is Deanna Ashby, Superintendent. I just want to say, obviously, this is a very long process. It looks like to me that you all have followed the procedure that's in place. And what I think is wonderful is that you've seen a lot of things that have worked really well through the process and some things that you want to change. So it appears to me that you all certainly have accomplished the task that's been set in front of you. I know that it's very hard to get survey feedback, whether it's from students, parents, or teachers at times, because there's a lot more surveys out there than probably there were 5 or 10 years ago. So well done, and look forward to seeing those changes that you've already gleaned from this.
Okay, as Rhonda mentioned, we have had some comments, additional comments come through chat that I don't want to leave anyone out on their comment. We'll need to go back to about 2:22 p.m. Was our last comment that was read. And this was back when we were talking about the Student Advisory Council, and Deanna agrees that that is a great opportunity to gain insight. Aaron has also suggested another possibility for student feedback would be to attach a reflection question or prompt to the test itself to ask students to evaluate the alignment of the test questions to their coursework in the actual context of the testing situation. Kelly Philbeck, one of our language arts program standards consultants, says that we did receive a tremendous amount of student feedback from the field test, and that occurred in the spring of this past year in 2020. So students were able to give us their opinions at the item and structure level of the assessment. Of course, that feedback is a little deeper in and directly attached to the actual assessment, however, which is driven by the blueprint. And then Mike Stacy has, we social studies people are a joy to deal with. We can't agree where to eat lunch, much less what should be covered in a particular class. And we've had some laugh out louds, and Rhonda has agreed that she's one of those social studies folks as well. And then when we got into agreeing whether the process was followed, which Deanna had mentioned, Mike agrees that it appears that the process was followed. So any other comments that you would like to bring forth regarding this, the PowerPoint itself, and we can move on into questions and answers around the total process for which you were asked to review ahead of time and to bring forth to this committee.
Joy, I wanted to mention, we had a comment early on about something looking a little different in the ARC report and what was one of the slides. I think that was a social studies. We'll double check that and make a correction. If we need to make a correction on that, we'll take a little deeper look. It's recorded. I think Aaron maybe pointed that out.
Yes, it was about the social studies does not match the one in the ARC report. So yes, we will do that.
Yeah, we'll look into that and see what we need to do. And again, the chat becomes kind of a nice record for us as well of the meeting today. Good.
And Rhonda, just a quick response. This is Kelly to Jackie's question about reading and writing, and that's 72%. That one particular question was asking teachers or respondents on how much they thought the blueprint was going to help instruction. And I think you're given in the blueprint like percentage parameters, like, you know, in high school, for example, you may do 60% informational text and 40% literary text. And so it gives you the percentages, but as far as really helping you with instruction, I could see how teachers and administrators might respond where the percentage wouldn't be as high on that particular question, because it gives you sort of the range. But as far as really helping you teach or giving you instructional strategies, I don't know that a blueprint is designed to do that. So that one question for us being a little bit lower, just because of the nature of the question, didn't bother me as much.
Thank you, Kelly.
Okay. Mary Lee has said a comment about science. Science is such a different discipline. Even high school teachers within science are subspecialized in the field, and they tend to think their specialty is the most important. You have to love the passion. Excited for this process in science. I am certainly impressed by this process and all the work that has been done. And then Phil says, I definitely think the process was followed as well. We can always try to get more student feedback, but we know it can be difficult. Okay. Any other comments or questions that you may have about this process that we have gone through today, the PowerPoint itself, as well as all of the materials that you have looked at? Okay, let's see if something else has come in. Okay, well, at this time, then, again, I don't want to cut you short. I want to leave plenty of opportunity for you to continue with this rich discussion. But at some point, if you, we will be ready to vote. And let me talk to you just a little bit about that. You received a form in your Google folder that you will need to sign. Either that you feel like this process that we have done today and the revision of the assessment blueprints, if you feel like it was sufficient or deficient. And then you will sign that with your signature, and you will email it back to Michael Hackworth. But we also are going to have a verbal vote as we have talked about earlier. And so at this time, I'm going to, we will again call the roll, just like we did earlier, and you will state your name and whether you find the process to be sufficient or deficient. Deanna.
Deanna Ashby, I find the process sufficient.
Okay, Jackie.
Jackie, I think you might be on mute. Sometimes it's really hard to find that little microphone.
I think she pressed the wrong button and checked herself out, actually.
Yeah, I think she left the conversation.
Okay, she'll probably log back on.
So Joy, why don't you go ahead and we'll get her on.
We'll come back to her.
Certainly. Jack?
Jack Jacobs, and I find that it is sufficient.
Thank you. Chris?
Chris Lamons, I find that the process was also sufficient.
Mary Lee?
Mary Lee Lewis, I find the process was sufficient.
Aaron?
Aaron Milburn, I find the process was sufficient.
Phil?
Phil Prokes, the process was sufficient.
Jeannie?
Jeannie Smith, sufficient.
And Mike?
Mike Stacy, sufficient.
Okay. So we have a unanimous, with the exception of we haven't heard from Jackie, vote. And so I guess that I'm hoping that she can get back on, but I don't see that she has yet.
The local thunderstorms may have reached Berea by now.
They may have. I will ask a question to Michael. Is it okay to move on and just have her to send her email vote in, or do we need, or is it a majority? Is that adequate?
We are at a majority, and we can have her vote sent in, and I can send that around to all committee members.
Perfect. All right. Well, again, thank you for your participation in this meeting today. I feel like it was a very informative meeting, and we learned a lot. And
Jack,
excuse me. Okay, Jackie.
I'm back. Yeah.
Okay. Good. Well, we are seeking your vote for this process, for it being either sufficient or deficient.
Okay, Jackie Burnside, the process is sufficient.
All right, then. Thank you so much. We appreciate that again. So that's 100% sufficient. And this will then be, we will inform our commissioner of this, and this process then will move forward to the August Kentucky Board of Education meeting. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to either Michael or Rhonda to, again, thank you, and to close out the meeting. So again, as far as for me, I appreciate all of you and everything that you have done. And I think everything went really well today.
Thank you, Joy. You did a tremendous job facilitating. It's always a challenge with a lot of technology going on. This is Rhonda. I do appreciate, again, we've voiced that many of us many times, but we know everybody's busy and they're trying to enjoy some time. So thank you so much for joining and being with us and meeting with us remotely through our virtual opportunity. We will take the feedback we've heard, and that'll be part of our conversation moving forward. So I think we've gotten some good suggestions on how to maybe increase that student role in the work. But this really helps us go through the entire process and move the blueprints on to formal final approval. Michael, did you have anything you want to add? And Michael, thanks to you for a lot of work across the year to get this done, and all of our OTL partners.
Sure. Thank you all. And I was actually in the chat just typing a reminder. If you will, if you could send the findings report that is located in the Standards and Assessment Process Review Committee, if you could electronically sign that and send that to me by Friday afternoon, that way that I can get all forms to the Kentucky Board of Education on your findings. Does anyone have any question about that form? Are you able to find it? It should be in the one folder that Standards and Assessment Process Review Committee. And we did make it to where that you could digitally or electronically sign that and just send it to me via email. But again, if you don't have any further questions, thank you all so much. I hope I haven't aggravated you all with all the emails. We look forward to working with you in the future. Like has been said, science is coming up down the road. So, you know, we will be working with you all again.
Jackie, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I wanted to say thanks, and I need Mike to send me, among my technical difficulties today, I need Mike to send me that document to be signed, just as a regular,
sure,
simple as possible. Yeah, thank you.
I'll actually just send it to the entire committee. That way it'll be easier for all of you maybe to access.
That'd be great. Thank you so much. And I apologize, my finger hit the wrong button and I disappeared there.
That's completely all right.
We've all had it happen.
Storms moving through as well. So
that's right. Don't worry about that. And so don't any of you block Michael's contact until you get the form. And don't block us, because, you know, now we know you, we've met you, we've seen your smiling face. We'll probably come back and say, hey, could you come and do something else with us? But thank you so much for agreeing to serve for Governor Beshear on this committee. We really appreciate it. Thank you all. Have a great rest of the day. Stay safe.
Have a good day.
Yeah.
Thank you.